What's going on, guys? Today we got a meta deck tier list based on the most recent ban list. We didn't discuss the ban list at all, mainly because I just was initially very pessimistic about it. But after looking at it a bit more, minus the obvious hits like hits the floodgates such as Mystic Mine and other things of the such, I think it wasn't honestly too bad of a list. It hit some things where it needed to, but I think cards like Rodent probably didn't need to be hit. They could have just left Substitute banned if that's the argument for it. And I think tier needed just a little bit more of a touch, but otherwise it was a pretty okay ban list. So we're going to go on and get into the decks that I think are going to be best, starting with Darkwing Blast forward, since that comes out in about 2 weeks. This is a list I got off Tier Maker. You can see the URL here. But yeah, so we're going to go on and get into it. We're going to just go, actually, we'll start with, one for each tier like we did last time. So we're going to go on and start with the Almost Rogue. Almost Rogue is a deck that needs a piece back in order to be playable because it just can't function as it is. Prankids is a perfect example of that. It needs Meow Meow. We know we'll never get it back while the Adventure package is still just as popular as it is and as prevalent as it is. So I think that's a good start for that. In terms of Rogue out of these decks here, there's a couple of really good ones that could fill this slot, but I think that the primary one should be Sky Striker. I think Sky Striker can't really handle the things that the current format is doing, so therefore I think it just belongs in Rogue because it can win games pretty easily just because of Engage and having the resource loop, but it's so weak, and with DD Crow as popular as it is, the deck kind of just hurts too much for something like that. So for tier 2, we have Exorcister. I think this deck is a lot worse going into the format now. Sprites are moving away from the Toad package and starting to run cheesy tech cards like Ibly. And the deck has a hard time with something like that, something I never even initially thought of until a friend of mine brought it up. But overall, I think Exorcister it's got a really good tier limit matchup, but it feels like it kind of just struggles against everything else. So that's why we're putting that there. Another tier 1 deck here, we got Math Mech. I don't think this is the best deck in the format. I think it's pretty close. I played the deck personally. It's very good at doing the one thing once, and then after that, it's like, it doesn't really do much. It just tries to kill you through access code like every other generic Cyberse deck does, minus Burn says, which is why, in my opinion, it's the worst Cyberse deck. But that being said, I think that Math Mech is very close to being the best deck. It's just missing some pieces. And then we're going to go on and get to the obvious, one of the best decks, is Tier. I think this is the best deck in the format. I really don't think that anything else can compete with this outside of Sprite. And even then, Sprite's pretty hindered, but you get to play some really crazy cards like Ibly, and you get to play the Jin now, and you get to play the better engine of the Sacred Beast and the Beavers with Nimble Angler. You have Sprite Sprint coming up. Crazy powerful cards. So, but we're supposed to be talking about Tier. Tier lost nothing, which is shocking. I don't understand why. The loss of Fairy Tale Snow is alright, but the deck could function without it, obviously. It has Gizmek. It still does the same play, still does the same combos. Its own engine got hurt technically with the Ronin Totem ban because a lot of the decks were starting to incorporate that. Chaos Ruler ban hurt too for the Punk versions, but this deck still just does way too much. Nothing really competes with it, and the issue with in my opinion, with Tier is it's a deck that lets you play on your turn 0, and if your opponent wins the die roll, you can literally full combo them. If you're lucky, of course, it's not ever guaranteed, but you could combo them on your turn, or on their turn 1, which is kind of ridiculous. So I think Tier is up there, obviously. The Ishizu stuff we get is going to be even better, and they're getting a mine out naturally. So yeah, we'll see how this goes. I think this will indefinitely end up being the only best deck. So talking about it, we're going to go ahead and put Sprite up here. I think this deck's still insane. You can still play Toad if you want. It's very easy to play Toad still. You get to play all these crazy rank 2 and link 2 synergy combos, like the Tri-Brigade version 1 is crazy, Runick is crazy. Everything else around Sprite is still just phenomenal, and that's what makes it so good. It loses its accessibility as an engine for most other decks, though, because most other decks are playing it solely for Gigantic to get into the Toad Elf play. So I think that's where Konami wanted the Ronin ban hit, is just to remove it as a viable like double negate engine in other decks, which is fine. I think that's totally reasonable. But going forward, I think we're going to see Sprite pick back up in people's radars, because at the moment it's pretty much just tier. So this is another tier 1 deck at Ignister. The Ignister deck is kind of like a combination of the two. It's a Ignister Cybers Mathmech deck. One of the things that Tier and Sprite both struggle with, Sprite less so now because Pixies is becoming back into the forefront of the decks, is beating over a monster with 6,000 attack. That's not affected by everything. So, and the Mathmech cards give it just this insane extender package and crazy follow-up. It gives you interrupt and a negate on your opponent's turn, along with your normal negate and your normal Ignister combo with Dan Mari. Doesn't really need anything else to be said. So we're going to go on and go back down to the almost Rogue section and Rogue. We're going to fill out the bottom first. I think Phantom Knights are very Rogue. 3 Fusion Destiny feels really nice for this deck because it really wanted that to begin with. But, I mean, it's still Phantom Knights. It still suffers pretty hard. The Adventure Phantom Knights stuff is pretty okay. There is a reason to play the Predaplant package now, but with the amount of hand traps in the format, the deck just cannot compete. It never really could. So we're going to go on into Tier 2. Like I said, we're going to try to like fill it out, so there's a row of each. We got Marincess. I think this is a really weak version of Mathmech. It's got a lot of one-card combo starters, more than Mathmech, for example, because it only has the one. Marincess has multiple. But the Marincess combo is so weak, and you're ending on just one monster, which just isn't enough in today's meta. We got the Almost Rogue ABC. I love this deck. I love seeing it pop up on Tier Maker all the time. ABC is very fun. Adventure ABC is the way to play it, obviously, but the Adventure cards in general are just very weak right now. So that's why they're down here. Along with Trap Tricks. Trap Trick just doesn't really do much. It sets up a couple of trap cards, and today's standard, when you got these as the best decks, primarily these two, you're going to play through them without an issue. I believe it's going to just be pure spellbooks. I think Spellbook Mine is a lot better than... Spellbook Runick Mine is a lot better than just pure spellbooks. But as a whole, spellbooks just got the best card, one of the best cards ever printed in Yu-Gi-Oh! Back. Is it going to do anything? Absolutely not. Is it going to see a lot of play in the beginning and then phase out? Absolutely, because everybody's going to play it. Like, I mean, myself, I played 3 Spellbook of Judgments back in 2013, so this is like a nostalgia field. I want to play this card type of thing, but I understand that the card's just not up to par nowadays. Like, it's crazy to think that a card that says search 8, special summon a Floodgate isn't remotely playable nowadays. That being said, I do think it's more playable than I'm initially giving it credit for, but I think that it's just under through the rose-tinted glasses of how powerful the card used to be. Nothing's going to feel worse than getting ashed on that card. Tier 2, get Adamantipator. So I would have normally put this deck in Rogue, but after playing against it a lot, and minus certain variances, this deck with Sprite feels kind of cracked. And it's just going to get better with Sprint because it's just an extra interrupt that they can get for free. In reality, I think this could probably be a Rogue deck because like pure Adamantipator definitely deserves to be down here to Rogue or maybe even almost Rogue. But I think that the Adamantipator Sprite version is very good. We got Dinosaurs here in Rogue to go with Dynamorphia. I think these two just need to be melded together to be played functionally. This card is... Therizia and Rexstrom are crazy cards, though. So maybe. Dragon Maid is always going to be down here. The deck sucks. I'm almost willing to make a new tier for it on how bad it is, but... Plunder Patrol here in Rogue. I think that the deck, again, just relies too hard on the Adventure Engine, and the Adventure Engine being so subpar at the moment doesn't help its case any. We got another Tier 2 deck in Fluanderies. Fluanderies is very good when it gets to do what it wants to do, but I mean, it's so hard for it to officially do. I do think, however, that this deck gets a lot better when Droplet takes back its spot in the main decks over Dark Ruler. because a lot of people are going to be shifting to Droplet because you need it for these 2 decks more so than Dark Ruler. And Shifter turns off Dark Ruler, but that's like a hypothetical scenario where it would make it better. But I still think in general that Flu deserves to be in this weird spot. I think it's like almost good enough to be tier 1, but it's like a tier 2 deck in terms of like performance and how well it actually does. And I don't believe in tier 1.5 or 2.5, so I think that's where it belongs. This deck is now dead, in my personal opinion. Now there could be some crazy wizard that figures out Dragon Link and make it like super effective. I've seen people talk about the Blackwing Dragon, I think is what it is. Like you mill 5 on summon, same as Chaos Ruler, but it doesn't add you anything back and doesn't summon anything back. So, well, I mean, that sounds awful. So, yeah, Earth Machine, almost rogue deck does 20-minute combo just to end on nothing. Eldritch variants are very good with the reboot ban, but I still don't think that was enough to make them tier 1. Adventure Eldritch branded is pretty sick, and it's one of the few adventure decks that doesn't actually need the adventure engine to function as a protective piece. So I think that's like an edge for the deck, as opposed to most of the other adventure decks. That being said, though, Reboot being banned is a pretty big incentive to want to play Eldritch. I know it was a one-of, but it feels like your opponent drew it more than they didn't. So maybe Eldritch could see more play as a pure Floodgate variant because we didn't see any Floodgates get hit. But we're not going to rant about the ban list. I did make a video about it for a reason. Labyrinth is going to be here in Rogue. I think that's another just like thing with Eldritch. It's a trap deck, but it's got more legs. Almost Rogue, we got the Liberos. Very close to being good. It saw a lot of success in the beginning of the format, right before the tiers, but it didn't like capitalize on it, if that makes sense. Like it didn't perform as well as it could have. And then for that, I think it's Almost Rogue. Same thing with Salamangreat. I love this deck to pieces, but it's pretty bad. Same thing with Madolche. These decks are all under the same boat of just auto-losing to Nibiru or any form of interruption for that matter. Like a key piece gets hit and then they just kind of fumble. Live Twin. So this is... I want to put this up here, actually, because I believe this is not a pure Live Twin deck. This should be just Live Twin Sprite, so when you see it, assume it's Live Twin Sprite. I think Live Twin Sprite is very good. I was very against it at first, and then seeing the deck play in action, especially with Sprint and actually playing it myself, the deck feels really clean. You get to do a lot of unfair stuff, and it's one of the only decks that gets to play Scythe still because of the Hulk ban. So if you wanted to go that route, you have a Scythe lock, and you can easily get it. So I think that this deck, as a Sprite engine, is very good. So if you're playing it with Sprite, you got tier 1, you get playing it by itself, it's tier 2. I think the Despia deck is tier 1 at the moment as well. Now this may be a very hard take, a very hot take rather. But I think Despia is very good situated to be tier 1, if not like the very top of tier 2. So just out of speculation, we'll put it at the top of tier 2. So Mirror Jade is a cracked card, and the amount of follow-up that this deck has in power on your opponent's turn is crazy. It's like a worse tier element, but it could play tier element cards, if that makes sense. Like it can be an engine in tier, but it can also just out-resource your opponent. Like Guardian Chimera is still in a crazy good card, in a crazy good spot. Fright for Patchwork is still like a +2 or 3 after all the effects have resolved. That's crazy. So I think that Despia is being heavily slept on just because of how bad of a Sprite matchup it has, but I think that should just, be looked at more. I think that this deck can easily climb up here to tier 1. We got Alistair. That kind of sucks. It's just too fair by today's standards, even if you shove 18 to 21 hand traps or board breakers in the deck. It's just really not that great. Like, the loss of Anaconda hurt a lot. It still gets to make DPE the best out of any of the decks, I guess, but DPE really isn't a format card anymore. We got Pendulum here in Rogue. Deck sucks. Don't play it. So we're going to go ahead and say that the Rika Sun Avalon deck is actually... I take it back. We're going to put it here with these 3. So Rika Sun Avalon is pretty good. It has crazy board potential. It gets the main deck floodgates that are crazy. It's got a crazy field spell too that lets you tribute its cost like Lair of Darkness, but it doesn't give him a token or anything. It's got insane crackback potential. I think the only thing that really makes this deck suffer is it is kind of susceptible to hand traps, more so than the other like tier 1 decks would be. Like, you could hit any of these and like they would be fine. But I think that Rika is definitely belonging in tier 2. It's got some of the craziest cards I've seen, and a really cool Link Climb combo. But yeah, I think in general it's just not as good as Mathmech or Live Twin, but we'll see. So this is also something I'm kind of skeptical on, because I don't think that Sword Soul is all that great, and I'm going to double down on it. I think Sword Soul is very weak at the moment. It's also trying to establish itself as too fair of a deck, which is where all these decks kind of like, they sit at. They're kind of too fair. Minus this one, but this one just, it has its own variant. So I guess that makes it fair, is like it has its own like variants where it could just summon a card and pass. But like all these tier 2 decks have too many things that make them fair, and that's what hurts them. These cards have enough cards in them that make them unfair. Mathmech, you got the super factorial loops, and then you got like 9 1-card starters when you play Small World. You got this big chunky boy here, and then you got the Scythe Lock along with just the absurd amount of hand traps. But I think there are better decks than Sword Soul at the moment, obviously. And on second guessing, I am going to actually put it in tier 1, just because the Sword Soul deck is so flexible on what it wants to play and what it can play. I think that it can just fit the correct hand traps for the format, or the correct board breakers, the correct floodgates. Like, it can mold itself to be what it wants to be. So that's where we're going to put it. Only because of its flexibility. But yeah, that's pretty much the only thing that saves Sword Soul, in my opinion, because otherwise the deck is just too fair. It tries to play traditional Yu-Gi-Oh! Where these two decks are just doing unfair, unrealistic things. And then we got the Runick deck. This could be Runick Sprite or just pure Runick. Both versions are crazy. The reason it never was good in the OCG solely is because of, you guessed it, no Mystic Mine. So the pure version over here has Mine. The Sprite version is just loving cards like this because it lets you meticulously break apart your opponent's board, and it works perfectly. Like, it's crazy strong how good it is. But the Runick deck definitely is tier 1 as an engine or as its own thing. It's kind of crazy. Everybody laughed at it when they first saw it. It's like, oh man, a mill deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! How's that going to work? Well, we figured out it's pretty damn good. That's how it's going to work. But the only thing that wasn't on this tier maker that I would add is the Scareclaw deck that Triff plays. Primarily the pure version. I think that the list that Triff plays is just a tier deck, but it's got a crazy engine. I think that belongs down here, like just Scareclaw's like a rogue deck, and then Tri-Brigade would probably be up here in 2 or 1 because of the Sprite interactions. Like, I think Tri-Brigade Sprite is probably the strongest standalone Sprite deck. But that's here, neither here or there. Thanks for watching. If you have any ideas of content you'd like to see, let me know. Let me know what you guys think of this list. This is a very, early list. I have played a few of these decks against some friends of mine. I haven't played very many, and this is all subjective because we don't have the full Darkwing Blast, like, TCG exclusives. I could change things, but we also don't know how the cards are actually going to transition over here. I think that, obviously, Sprite, whatever it is going to help Sprite take back its spot as one of the best decks, even though nobody's really contesting that fact. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Remember to comment, rate, subscribe. These videos, they take a couple takes. It's probably my 3rd or 4th one now. So I appreciate the like or comment just for all the effort. And yeah, we'll see you back with some more local feature matches now that real life problems are over. Thanks for watching. Peace, YouTube.